welcome in. Good to see you guys. Saw some of y'all last night at the Travs game. That was a good outing, even if it was 200 degrees outside. It was in the shade, so it was only like 180, I think. Hunter's not here yet. I saw his wife just a moment ago, so I think he's around, but he's filled in last week, and really appreciated him doing that. They're newer to this congregation, been visiting with us for several weeks, and he and I visited some, and I knew that he had taught at his other church, and so I thought, yeah, I'd really like to hear him lead a class. So asked him to do that. Glad he said yes. It was brave of him to say yes, to be an auditorium class in a newer congregation, so that takes a lot of courage. But I watched it online. I was in Belize and watched it, I think, on Monday or Tuesday, and thought he did a really good job. So, and I heard y'all's comments, and appreciated those. Miss Linda, good morning. I don't know.
There's a really beautiful lady. We were back there in a class, and we just found out.
Okay. All right. There she is. All right. All right. Yes, I'm glad you're here. What an introduction, right? Linda, when I come in, I need you to say that about me every Sunday, right? Is the ladies' class dismissed this morning? Is that, not that we don't like having women in here, but I guess Gwen is out, right? Is she usually teaching that, Gwen? So y'all are stuck with me. We're in 1 Samuel. And Hunter, I was just saying good things about you. And I watched your class, and I was telling them, and really appreciated you being willing to fill in. And then just blessed by what you spoke on. All right, so we're in 1 Samuel chapter 6. If you would open your Bibles there, those of you who've not been with us, we've been going kind of story by story, chapter by chapter through 1 Samuel. We started in May, and it's May, June, almost, well, what are we, the middle of July. So more than halfway done with the class, and we're in chapter 6. So this is, we're not going to make it through even 1 Samuel. We're supposed to get through 1 and 2 Samuel, but here we are. So 2 weeks ago, we'll kind of pick up where we left off and get a running start into this, since it's been a couple of weeks since we were in this, but also to revisit some of what was going on. You remember when the ark is sent into battle, Eli, the priest, allows it to go, or it's the elder's idea to come get the ark of God and bring it into battle. And who are the people of God fighting at this point? It's not the Babylonians or the Assyrians, it's the Philistines. And so they're having trouble against this neighboring people, and they lose in battle, and they say, what do we need to do? Well, we need to, maybe if we got this, the ark, and brought it, it would help us, it would save us, and we'd defeat the Philistines. And so then the second time they go back into battle, they lose worse than the first time that we're told about in chapter 4. So now the ark has been captured by the Philistines. And do you remember what happened among the cities of the Philistines?
They kept getting plagues.
Yes.
Every time they switched cities with the ark, it was like
That's right.
doom and gloom. So they were
That's right.
I get that.
It was almost a kind of like hot potato or something of like, oh, we don't want this. This is not good for us. Our people are being afflicted by tumors, by illness, by these plagues, just as God had done to the Egyptians, right? It reminds us a little bit of the Exodus and how the people come to stink in the sight of the Egyptians and Pharaoh, and he ends up sending them away. And it's kind of similar to that here, where the ark is there, and it's contaminating the people. It's causing them this deathly panic, as the story says, and so they don't know what to do with it, right? They conquered the people. It's their spoil of war, and so they should get to keep it. This is a nice thing to have, but nobody can kind of keep it in its place, so they don't know what to do with it. They keep passing it around. But everywhere that they pass it, the same thing keeps happening.
And their God bows down.
Yes. Dagon, their god, they put it beside Dagon. Dagon falls over. They put him back up. He falls over, and his head and his hands are cut off. And so, in addition to the tumors and such. So eventually they convene the wisest among them, and they say, let's send it back. And they do kind of this weird experiment with it to see whether maybe the sicknesses and stuff were just accidental, they think, or maybe it was the Israelites' God who was afflicting them. So they do this kind of experiment to see which it is. They cast lots, so to speak, to determine this. So let's see where we want to begin. All right, so we'll start just in the beginning of chapter 6, and I'll read, and we'll keep moving from there, because my goal today is just to get us to chapter 7 and verse 3 for next week, where Samuel comes back onto the stage. All right, so verse 1 of chapter 6, the ark of the Lord was in the country of the Philistines 7 months. This is how long they have it. And the Philistines called for the priests and diviners and said, what shall we do with the ark of the Lord? Tell us, with what shall we send it to its place? So they're already thinking, we have to just get rid of this thing because it's too much trouble. It's not worth it. Some of us have had vehicles like that, right, that keep breaking down. You think, how much money can I pour into this thing? I got to get rid of this thing. Well, all right, I don't know why that came to mind, but it did. Tell us with what we shall send. And they said, verse 3, if you send away the ark of God to Israel, do not send it empty, but by all means return him a guilt offering. So they're thinking that, well, maybe there is a God over here. They're, of course, pagan, polytheists, so they have Dagon and different gods that they're thinking of. And how do we appease this other God, the Israelites' God? They don't realize that he is the one true God, the only God. But there's something there. And so they say, send him a guilt offering when you send it back. And then you will be healed, and it will be known to you why his hand does not turn away from you. And they said in verse 4, what is this guilt offering that we shall return to him? And they answered, 5 golden tumors and 5 golden mice, according to the number of the lords of the Philistines. For the same plague was on all of you and on your lords. So it sounds like there's these shapes that they make with gold, and gold being costly, so this is not just like a lump of clay, but they put this with the ark, and 5 tumors and 5 mice, or maybe some, I don't know if some of your Bibles seem to think that these are the same thing. Carol, do you have? Okay, rats, not mice. Is that what your Bible says, is rats? And I don't really know the biological difference between rats and mice, other than rats are bigger size. Yes, rats are bigger. I'd rather have a mouse than a rat in my house. I know that much. But so size, I guess. So these are pretty significant things and shapes that they're going to send that somehow connect to the disease. And, it's not clear where the rats or the mice come from, because earlier in the story, there's no mention of that. So maybe there's some speculation that perhaps they thought the mice were carrying the illness. Maybe that was like the means by which God did this, instead of just, people waking up out of the blue with the illness. Maybe God used rats to spread this plague.
Well, like the bubonic plague and all that.
Yeah.
Come from the fleas on the rats.
Okay.
And then they attacked the people, so that just makes what God inflicted.
Yeah.
The rats and the fleas, and they did their work.
Yeah, an easy and typical carrier of some of this sorts of things that we're familiar with. So maybe it is that God does this, or maybe there's no association. There's some questions we just don't know what's exactly going on here. But they do have these mice or these rats. According to the number of the lords of the Philistines, for the same plague was on all of you and on your lords. We talked about the Pentapolis, the 5 cities of the Philistines, and we'll come to that. Those 5 listed in verse 17 in just a moment. In verse 5, so you must make images of your tumors and images of your mice that ravage the land and give glory to the God of Israel. Perhaps he will lighten his hand from off you and your gods and your land. I love that idea of the hand of God being heavy, right, on them. That's what they feel, as if God had reached down and placed his hand over them. They were kind of feeling the weight of that and wanted that hand to be lightened and taken off. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're just dropping it. Linda, you've not been here because you've been in the women's class, so I'm sure you're confused. But well, that seems to be, well, you know what tumors are on people, and it seems like that may be the illness or how it was showing on the people that God was afflicting, and so they thought, in their way of thinking, if they offered that kind of representation to atone for, to heal it, I think that's the connection there.
But it kind of confuses me because
Yeah.
it's been lost on the root.
Well, it's weird to think about, what does a gold tumor look like? I mean, that would be if you had like a lump of clay, and I said, everybody make a tumor. I don't really know exactly. I'd probably make kind of like a hill-looking thing, but I don't know exactly what I would do with that clay. So exactly what this looked like, we're not sure. So verse 5, make images of your tumors and the mice that ravage the land, give glory to the God. Verse 6, why should you harden your hearts as the Egyptians and Pharaoh hardened their hearts? After he dealt severely with them, did they not send the people away and they departed? And so they're taking a cue from an earlier story. The Philistines don't have the Bible, so it's interesting to think, how did they know these stories? Apparently, the peoples in that area, they heard stories of other peoples and their, what they would have thought of as legends. The Philistines, of where the Israelites tell the story about the Egyptians, and then now all of a sudden they find themselves in the place of the Egyptians, and they think, oh, do you remember that story that we've heard? And so it is interesting how God's reputation and God's mighty deeds do circulate even beyond the people. And so the neighboring peoples know about this. And they find themselves in the place of the Egyptians. Now, the other thing that this does for us who only have this story and are reading this is, for us, it makes the connection more explicit, doesn't it? For them to say, thinking of the Egyptians, now we as the readers of the story are thinking about, how is this story similar to that story? And so there's a connection there in that detail that we have. All right, then take and prepare a new cart and milk cows on which there's never come a yoke, and yoke the cows to the cart, but take their calves home away from them. It's a new cart, meaning it's not been used before. It's not been maybe defiled by other religious practices or uses that they would have put it to. So it's a brand new cart. So again, they kind of have a sense of how this ought to happen with God and give them a new cart and these cows that's never had a yoke on them before. But take their calves away from them and take the ark of the Lord and place it on the cart and put in a box at its side the figures of gold. So on the cart is the ark and the box which you're returning to him as a guilt offering. And then send it off and let it go its way and watched. So I do wonder, how did they get the ark? How did they get it on the cart? Don't you wonder? Because what happens do you remember the story, and we kind of might bring this up in a moment, in 2 Samuel 6, when David brings the ark into Jerusalem? Do you remember the guy Uzzah, who reaches out to steady the ark, and what happens to him? He's gone, right? And so here we have the Philistines who are putting the ark on this, cart, and maybe they're already infected and already sickly, the ones that are doing this, or maybe God allows them to do this in some way, but we're not really told. But they seem to be handling the ark and putting it on this on the cart. So then they have this plan. Here's how they're going to tell if the sickness was accidental or coincidental, or if it was, no, this is the Israelites' God who's afflicting you with this, and they're going to watch this experiment. Send it off, let it go its way and watch. If it goes up on the way to its own land, to Beth Shemesh, which is apparently just a nearby town, is why they named this town Beth Shemesh, why they thought of it to go there. Then it is he who has done us this great harm. It's this God, if it goes back to this city of theirs, of the Israelites. But if not, then we shall know that it was not his hand that struck us. It happened to us by coincidence. Now, they don't say, if it goes off another way, we'll go get it again. I think they would probably just leave it, right? But they say, if it goes back to the Israelite city, then we'll know for sure that it was God who did this. So we're in verse 10 of 1 Samuel chapter 6. The men did so and took 2 milk cows and yoked them to the cart and shut up their calves at home. And they put the ark of the Lord on the cart and the box with the golden mice and the images of their tumors. And the cows went straight in the direction of Beth Shemesh along the highway, lowing as they went. They turned neither to the right nor to the left. And the lords of the Philistines went after them as far as the border of Beth Shemesh. So a couple of our more experienced members with cattle, I remember last time we met, were explaining the significance of the lowing as they went, which was for them to, and I guess y'all know this, but it wasn't something that I ever dawned on me, but for them to shut up their calves at home, what would have been the instinct of those cows? To go back, right? To go back. I mean, separating a mom from its child, to want to, with everything in you, to go back. And this was kind of like an added layer of the test is if the cat, I don't know, if they'd come back to their own, want to come back in that direction, then it would show too that it wasn't God who had afflicted them with this illness. So there's this other complexity here with the calves being at home and shut up. So they're lowing as they went. So, and lowing apparently is like, you say bawling. Is that what you said, Johnny, last time? Bawling, like you're bawling out, yeah. But not just like a sing-song kind of noise, right, from the cows. This would have been like in pain or in, right, that kind of, it's hard to know the emotion of a cow, right? Without being able to talk with them about why they're feeling what they're feeling. But an unpleasant kind of...
Probably maybe before they were even weaning age, when they naturally would have been staying together, very unnatural for them to leave them and keep going.
Right.
And not just be at odds with one another on the cart and trying to turn around and run back and jump over a fence with the cart.
Right, right.
Some things like that, at that point, with the cow-calf relation there, and it just was, everything that was happening was unnatural, not by nature.
Right, very good. Yeah, they say in the wilderness you don't want to get between a bear and its cubs, right? Or a moose and its, whatever the baby moose calves are, the word for baby moose. You don't want to get between. That's where it gets really dangerous. And so there's this, and I think parents, but especially moms, would attest to the power of, you separate me from my children, it's not going to be pretty. You're not going to do it. And so, what is it?
Moose do that too.
Moose, exactly.
Looking at a video the
Yeah,
other day,
yeah.
And this person was coming through there in their car, and there was the moose, and it got right in the middle of the baby, and man, here came that moose, it just took barrel.
So, well, good thing we don't have a lot of moose around here. But, in case you find yourself in a place with moose, keep that in mind. All right, so they turned neither to the right nor to the left, and the lords of the Philistines went after them as far as the border of Beth Shemesh. So, it's almost comical to me that, like, the ruling people, there's 5 cities and apparently 5 lords of the Philistines, one for each primary city that they had, that these 5 are like following this thing on the road. They're like, we have to see this. They don't just send somebody and say, tell us what happens. We don't, we got other things to worry about. They're like following at the heels of these things, thinking, this is unbelievable. These cows are going off right toward Israel, to Beth Shemesh. All right, so then Verse 13. I think this is new ground for us. The people of Beth Shemesh were reaping their wheat harvest in the valley. So I think this would have been spring or early summer where this would have been taking place. They lifted up their eyes and saw the ark and rejoiced to see it. There's this irony in this story, isn't there, where the people had brought the ark to win their battles, thinking this thing had magical powers. And this 2 or so chapters go by where the ark is just, God is taking care of it himself without the help of any warrior or army or, God is going to see to it that this thing comes back like a boomerang to his people. And God is God. God is okay. He's going to see to it that his plans succeed and that what is right is accomplished. So this comes back and they rejoice. They're in the middle of their work. And they look up and they say, oh, this is here it comes. Unbelievable. The cart came into the field of Joshua of Beth Shemesh and stopped there. I think we can read about that back in the book of Joshua? A great stone was there. They split the wood upon the wood of the cart and offered the cows as a burnt offering to the Lord. It's like, and I don't think this was the Philistines' intention, but it's almost like you get like a little kit that's like everything you need for dinner tonight, right? Some like Blue Apron, y'all do that kind of thing. And every little thing, every little packet of seasonings in there, and everything's there. And this is kind of like a little worship kit that the Philistines have sent back to to Israel. It's like everything you need to, make this sacrifice. You've got the cart with the wood, and you've got the animals there. And it's just already made for them to worship God. I don't think that was the Philistines' intention to also, they were sending it back to get the illness off of them. But the Israelites use it well to worship God. It says the Levites took down the ark of the Lord and the box that was beside it, in which were the 5 golden figures, set up and set them upon the great stone that was there. And the men of Beth Shemesh offered burnt offerings and sacrifices on that day to the Lord. So who handles the ark when it comes back? In verse 15? Yeah, the Levites. Okay, so they had enough sense that there's some Levites in that area. They had enough sense to let those folks touch it and handle it. And so far, things seem to be going well. We'll have a bit of a twist in just a second. And they offered burnt offerings and sacrifices on that day to the Lord. Yes, yeah, David.
They might have had some respect for God because it was a new card, and it was
Right.
cows that had been harnessed.
Right.
I think there was something in that, in
Yeah.
the preparation for that.
Yeah, perhaps so. And part of what scholars will wonder too is there some overlap between their religious practices and the Israelites' practices? So the sense of the newness or the cows had never been yoked. Is there something? Seems like there's significance here in our Bible, but was there something for the Philistines that they also had those practices?
Just like we said, they had heard about the Egyptians.
Right.
So I think there's some interlacking in there.
They do, yeah.
They believed to some extent.
Yeah. Yeah, they knew the rules to play by, just a little bit anyway, it seems. All right, and then in verse 16, and when the 5 lords of the Philistines saw it, they returned that day to Ekron, which was I think the closest city, or where it just came from, right? Ekron. And verse 17, these are the golden tumors that the Philistines returned as a guilt offering to the Lord. And here are the 5 cities: Ashdod, Gaza, Ashkelon, Gath, and Ekron. So 5 for 5 cities, and the golden mice, according to the number of all the cities of the Philistines, belonging to the 5 lords, both fortified cities and unwalled villages. So, like any place, I guess, you'd have some primary cities, you'd have kind of more rural areas, unwalled villages. So both of these, and the great stone beside which they set down the ark of the Lord is a witness to this day in the field of Joshua of Beth Shemesh. So whenever this book is being written and circulated, they say you could still go there today. Go check it out. It's still standing, and you can see there's a witness to this story there in the field of Joshua. Okay, then, verse 19. This story, the Bible, is just so interesting to me, and would not have been just full of surprises, I think. I wouldn't think if I was making up this story, I don't know that I would have immediately gone here. But without warning, in verse 19 it says, and he struck some of the men of Beth Shemesh. Who's he? God, right? The Lord struck him right there. So, I mean, he's already afflicted the Philistines. He's brought back the ark. All is well that ends well. Happy ending, right? The ark is back. Well, let's move on to a different topic. Not so fast, right? He struck some of the men of Beth Shemesh because they looked upon the ark of the Lord. What were they supposed to do with it, right? But they were looking upon it, or maybe they were looking in it. They looked into it. Okay, they looked into it.
They gazed into it.
They gazed into it.
Stood there and looked in there,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. I kind of just think, that's probably a bunch of teenagers, don't you think? Like late at night, everybody went to bed, and the teenagers are like, let's go, we got to find something to do. The ark, let's go look inside the ark and paint it with graffiti or. Yeah. I've got some stories, but my mom's here, so don't, let's not talk about my teenage years too much. But yeah, so they look upon it or they look in it. Sometimes those prepositions can be hard to translate. And because prepositions can mean, really kind of like in English too, they can mean multiple things. And even little subtle shifts make a big difference between looking upon and looking into, right? That gives us a little bit different information. But it does seem like there's something more than just put your eyes on it. Maybe this seems like there's some kind of unholy gazing, right, Johnny?
Man, I mean, they had hard, fast instructions on how to handle it.
Yeah.
Of course, obviously, the Philistines didn't know the details. They knew the history of Egypt. They didn't know the details. It wasn't supposed to be carried on a cart, not a new cart, not any kind of cart.
Yeah.
It was just to have staves put through the loops and the pointers to be carried not by any Levite, but a certain branch of the Levites, I think the Kohathites, were to carry it on their shoulders, So they were told, that's one reason God was upset with them to start with.
Yeah.
And letting his glory depart, because they had lost all these things. They hadn't paid attention. They just probably didn't care that much. Oh yeah, they're going to rejoice. We got it back. Now we're back in power. But that's not the case.
Right.
God's taken this occasion to remind them to pay attention.
That's right. Pay attention.
Pay attention. David's going to do the same thing. They're going
Right.
to learn the same lesson.
Right.
And he's going to search out and find out what he should do.
Yeah.
And then he's going to go back and do exactly what he should do. And all will go well.
I want to sympathize a little bit with the Israelites here too, just to say, I see myself, in their mistake of they didn't ask for the ark. God sent it to them. This is a great thing. God, and you think of the way that the cities would have been spread out and isolated to some degree from the way news would have traveled, or not as quickly as it is today. And so you think, here's our city that gets this. What a special thing. God must really think that we're doing okay. This is just a day to relax, let your hair down, and enjoy, right? And yet they, as you said so well, I think they go a little too far, right? They forget. They forget. Just because God has done all this and the ark is back doesn't mean God is just saying anything goes now. And this is a reminder to them that not anything goes, even on a good day, right? Carol? And then Robin.
It's possible that the only way to look in the ark was to look at it from the top down, because the mercy seat may well have been the door, so maybe they didn't want to just look. Maybe they touched the mercy seat and moved to the side and looked in. I'm not sure about that, but that's a possibility. That would be worse than just glancing at it.
Yeah.
They weren't to touch it.
Yeah.
And they couldn't
Not
look
touch
in it
it.
without touching it, moving the top.
Mm.
You know, and that's where they want to ride.
Because it's a big area,
Yeah.
Israel at that time.
Yeah.
It's a lot bigger than it is now.
Yeah.
How would you get the word around
Right.
the country?
Well, and it goes back to our points earlier with Eli and how the state of Israel at this point, you know, with the judges, everyone does what is right in his own eyes. I mean, just the way that things have slipped across the board. There wasn't this culture of faith that permeated every place the way that it should have. And so, yeah, I think it shows how the people had slid, even if they should have known, as you're saying, Leo. Yeah, Robin?
I'm not sure what it's quoting, but I have a footnote for verse 19, and it says, "But the sons of Jeconiah did not rejoice with the men of Beth Shemesh when they saw the ark of the Lord."
Okay.
Could have had a bearing on why he struck them if there were some
Is that like a textual variant, you think?
Well, it looks like another 70, and it says reads, so I don't know.
Okay, yeah, it's probably another text, another manuscript that has that line added that isn't in most. So that's interesting. I didn't know that detail.
70 would be
Septuagint, yeah, yes. Oh, yeah, from the Greek, so rather than the Hebrew text. And those will vary at points.
From get-go?
But they what?
Had they not defiled the ark from get-go? They transported it to this part,
Yeah.
and God didn't strike them dead or do anything then. I agree with you, there was a purpose, he waived it and let them do all of this till he got to that part.
Yeah.
Because from get-go, they had touched it, put it on the cart, everything was done wrong with it.
Yeah. I think there's a message here for us too of, you know, God is a forgiving God. God is a tolerant, patient God. We'd all agree, right? He's merciful. He's slow to anger. But I think at the same time, I think we're warned by stories like this not to take advantage of that patience, right? And for the people to think, you know, hey, we're doing the best we can. Let's just cut some corners. You know, God still is God. And we need to be reminded of that. All right, let's carry on. We got about 10 minutes. I appreciate y'all's engagement. This is good. So he struck the men, God did, because they looked upon or into. He struck 70 men of them, and the people mourned because the Lord had struck the people with a great blow. Then the men of Beth Shemesh said, "Who is able to stand before the Lord, this holy God? And to whom shall he go up away from us?" And so they sent messengers to the inhabitants of Kiriath Jearim, saying, "The Philistines have returned the ark of the Lord. Come down and take it up to you." So here they send up to another city, Kiriath Jearim, where the ark will be until David comes and gets it, right? Brings it to Jerusalem in 2 Samuel 6. So this is where it's going to be housed. But they do the same thing that the Philistines have done, right? Where they say, somebody come get this from us. We don't want it here. So even this Israelite city is saying, let's pass this buck somewhere else and get it away from us. And so they send the news and they'll come get it. But, you know, it is handled by the Levites, as we read just a moment ago. There's a little bit of a wording, an interesting way of wording things in verse 20 that was pointed out in some of what I was reading this week. That the men of Beth Shemesh said, "Who is able to stand before the Lord, this holy God?" And there's that. You guys have that? Wow, this holy God. I guess that's a pronoun. This holy God. The word "this." I need to go back to school and learn my parts of speech. Do your translations say this? This? Or does anybody else have anything different? This holy God in verse 20? This holy God. And so, you know, some folks will say this, it almost shows a sort of a distance, right? Rather than the holy God or our holy God, It's almost like here is a God that even we don't know, this holy God, maybe in the same way that the Philistines might have beheld God, of this thing, this one that we don't know intimately well, don't have a relationship with. What is it? Yeah. Yeah. They don't know God, yes. Yes, Hunter. Yeah. We didn't talk about that, but that is a translation issue. You have numbers of like exactly what percentage and what amount of people. That's in verse 19. He struck 70 men of them. What does your translation say, Hunter? 50,000, 70 men, right? Anybody else have that or have something similar? Yeah. And mine just says 70 men. And so it could be, I think the way that this, I don't know why mine doesn't say the 50,000, but it may be like the 70 of 50,000, or it may be 50,000, 70. What is it?
Mine says 70 of 50,000.
Okay, yeah, 70 of 50,000, maybe 50,000, 70, so just 70 more than 50,000.
It says, in footnote, that the adding of the 50,000 is not grammatically correct, so it's probably a copyist error.
Okay, so yeah, copyist error. So there you go. We're getting into some good stuff. Footnotes from Robin and copy errors. So as I understand it, this gets into some like textual, if you're interested in textual criticism, stuff that some biblical scholars will do that I certainly don't do or qualified to do, who deal with the texts of Scripture and the copies that we have, the manuscripts that we have as they've been passed down. And obviously those are fairly stable, but then you do have some discrepancies, right? And there's some in the New Testament too that we, just as a side note, that we do have. If you're reading like a King James versus an ESV or an NIV, there'll be times where it'll skip a verse. Have you all ever had that experience before? So one's in like, I think of Acts chapter 8, where Philip says to the eunuch something like, here is water, what hinders me? And in the King James, there's an addition that says something like, if you believe with all your heart, you may. And in the ESV, NIV, those who are using a different kind of approach to texts and knowing what would be the most original and whatnot, it doesn't have that verse. So this is getting into the weeds some on that. And then you have, as Robin and Mickey mentioned, the differences between the Hebrew and the Greek translation of the Hebrew. And what's strange, would be strange to us because we think, well, it was Hebrew. They wrote it in Hebrew. They were Jews. And so they must have used that. But by and large, the Christians in the first century writing the New Testament are actually using the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament. So it gets a little bizarre. It's a little counterintuitive that they would be using not the Masoretic Hebrew text, but they'd be using the Greek translation of that was more pervasive and common for them. And then there's some differences, and if you kind of dig into some of the quotations and how they're used. But as I understand it, all of that to say, I spoke with some of our Old Testament faculty at Harding, and they say, Samuel is one of the, how did they say it? Just, if there's questions about texts, of any book of the Old Testament, Samuel is the most like broken and kind of troubled as far as the actual texts go that we're using to translate of any of the books of the Old Testament. So there's probably more of that with Samuel than any other book. If some of y'all did not understand a word I just said, then that's okay. I didn't understand half of it either. But there is that just to keep in mind. It's why your footnotes will be a little different, why our translations are a little bit different. So, Mom, did you have something?
Back in verse 20, it doesn't show that they had any reflection on what they had done that was wrong, that caused,
Any what?
They want to blame God
Oh,
for that, in verse 20.
oh, verse
They
20.
don't reflect on
Okay.
what they did at all.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They don't show kind of repentance or take ownership of that. They kind of put the blame on God and what he's doing. Yeah. Yeah, I can certainly see that. So again, maybe a processing issue, right? They're not processing this as they should. Perhaps if they had repented and done better, they could have kept the ark there.
I think the Levites that were there would have known that we shouldn't handle it, we shouldn't
Yeah.
look into it.
Right. Seems like they would have. We don't have a lot of information about who exactly is looking into it, if it's with their approval, without it. But yeah, they send it on down the road because it's too hot for them to handle. And so we come to verse 1 of chapter 7. The men of Kiriath Jearim came and took up the ark of the Lord and brought it to the house of Abinadab on the hill. They consecrated his son Eleazar, who's not the same Eleazar as Aaron's son, right? This would be a different one. I don't think he was still living. That would have been an old man. Eleazar to have charge of the ark of the Lord. From that day the ark was lodged at Kiriath Jearim. A long time passed, some 20 years, and all the house of Israel lamented after the Lord. So this 20 years that it's in this city, Kiriath Jearim, before it goes to Jerusalem, is a time of lamenting. So why do you think that is? Why do you think they have the ark back, and apparently the afflictions have stopped? Why would they? When are they lamenting, or what are they lamenting? Do you think? Makes me wonder. Okay. Yeah, so the story up to then, their actions and why everything that had gone wrong. So maybe it is at this point starting to sink in some.
My translation says they yearned.
They yearned.
Yearned after the Lord.
Yeah. Yeah, well, good. And then in verse 3 we see, and we'll save this for next time, but Samuel says, and this seems out of the blue because we forgot about Samuel, even though the end of chapter 3 showed us that the word of God was with Samuel and things had turned away from Eli to him. This is the first time he comes back onto the scene. If you are returning to the Lord with all your heart. So the way that sounds like there was some indication that they wanted to return to God with all their heart. They were ready to do that. So maybe this morning or maybe this yearning was they were getting ready to turn back to God. So just as a closing word here about this, I love the Bible, and I love getting into the text and just seeing how unexpected things happen, like how the people of God expect the ark to save them, and God says, "You've misunderstood how this works. I'm not obligated to save you just because you bring this box into on the battlefield." And so they get defeated. The ark is captured. This is a terrible thing. They've lost the ark. Can you imagine losing the ark? Like it was your watch and you lost the ark of God. This was bad. But the ark by itself, just the story follows this thing that God had said would be where he met his people, this ark, and it takes care of itself. It comes back to the people unexpectedly. And then once it gets back to the people, they think, oh, everything's good now, and they rejoice, they sacrifice, and then the next verse says, and God afflicted them because they were maybe too careless in how they were approaching this God again. I mean, the issue was still there, right? It had not changed just because they lost it and it came back. And then it gets to Kiriath Jearim. I was just thinking some about, just to close this out, jumping way ahead and probably out of context to Romans chapter 2, where Paul will say in verse 6, Romans chapter 2 and verse 6, that God will render to each one according to his works. To those who by patience and well-doing seek for glory and honor and immortality, he will give eternal life. But for those who are self-seeking and do not obey the truth, but obey unrighteousness, there will be wrath and fury. There will be tribulation and distress for every human being who does evil, the Jew first and also the Greek, but glory and honor and peace for everyone who does good, the Jew first and also the Greek. And then he says in verse 11, God shows no partiality. Or I love the King James, which is, God is no respecter of persons, right? And that language is great, but no respecter of persons to say, you know, we see that, I think, in the story some where, you know, if the people of God do not obey God, then God is not going to say, well, these are my children, so they're fine. I'm going to spoil them and turn a blind eye. No, God afflicts them so that they learn and will know how to have relationship with God. God does not just turn a blind eye. God is no respecter of persons. And I think that's a good word for us today as we close. So thank you all for your engagement and reading, and we will be back with Samuel in verse 3 of chapter 7 next week, Lord willing.